So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about the basics of making the basic introduction to Android Studio and what you would basically need to do to get an app up and running here. So this is the welcome screen that you're going to see when you enter into Android Studio. You can open a new project. You can import from Gradle sample code. This is particularly helpful if you want to see any of the Google examples. But for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to choose to start an Android Studio project over here. This is going to be the name of your app, this first thing that comes into here. I'm going to choose my new app. The name is basically arbitrary at this point. It does have an influence over the location on the hard drive where this file is going to be stored. And also you pick a company domain. This is again relatively arbitrary if you're just getting used to Android and Android projects, but what you're going to notice is that the domain is reversed, and reverse domain notation is used over here for the individual package names, and the package name is going to be important for all of the files inside of the project. This is sufficient for right now. When you're just getting started, you don't really need to pay too much attention to these settings. We can just click next. We know a name and we know where it's going to be stored. When you are getting into this screen and you're going to be targeting particular devices, it's important that you target a device that an API, and the API is the particular SDK level. You have to target a minimum API that can be met by the device. So, for example, many of our devices are API 23 in the room. That's Android 6.0. I think API 22 is something safe to work with. It's guaranteed to work on any of our devices over here. If you want the latest and greatest, version of Android, you can not in that direction. You can put API 29 on there. Really, the only thing that's you can see API 22. You target 80% of devices worldwide. The thing that's important is that you have the SDK downloaded, that you're actually going to meet the requirements within the system for meeting this. So I'm going to target API 22. That's what I usually do here. And then we're going to move on to the basic activity screen. So our basic activities, there's a really nice template gallery that's going on inside of here. So you can see this guy has the floating action button. This guy has bottom tab navigation. This template uses basically nothing. Maps, login, you name it, master detail flow. There are a lot of really nice things, tabbed activity down at the bottom, and that we will use and we will get to at some point. For right now, I think getting the basic structure organized, looking to empty activity is a good start, and that's where I'm going to start right now. The activity is going to be the basic class that is the sort of root of your entire project. It inherits from context, and you're going to be doing most of your editing, at least inside of activities. So the main activity is a safe name to go with. Once you get more accustomed to the environment, you can choose a different activity name. It's also good practice when you're getting started to just generate the layout file and use the activity main. Use the names that they give you right now. They're generally good names. So if I call it like my activity over here, they generate activity my. That's a good name, as you'll come to see. Activity main my. And also we're going to use backwards compatibility over here. We're going to use app compat support. So I'm going to press finish over here, and this is going to bring up the basic project. This thing is going to get started, and it's going to create a lot of the basic files that you would need to create an app here. So we're going to let this guy run its course. It's fairly straightforward. So what I want to talk about next are the essential components and just getting used to this environment. So here's our main activity. This activity is a class. It extends app compat activity. So app compat, when we chose backwards compatibility, we said that. onCreate is kind of like the main method in a way of Android apps. It's not exactly the same, but it's a class activity from activity. It's a class method, so this is why we're going to have to override to change the default behavior. So we can leave this guy just as it is for right now. You can see there's an import statement, so it loads the app compat libraries. And then what we have over here is the activity main XML. So the way the app works is that apps are comprised of Java files. There's this entire ecosystem that you can see over here. If I look at the project menu, there are a whole boatload of files that are actually generated when you want to create this project. For just getting started, I think the important things to understand are the manifest. So I'm going to open up our Android manifest. Our Java file for our main activity, you're going to notice over here there are 3 folders inside of this Java file. Excuse me, I don't know what I did right there. There are going to be, I think I tried to move something actually. So inside of the Java file there are 3 folders. There's one for Android test and test. Those are sort of system reserved. We're going to stay away from those guys. But if you stay inside the package name, notice this is the package name that was created at the very beginning. So if we look inside this package name and then the main activity name that we've created, that guy's over here. I'm just going to move him to the left. Additionally, we have a resource folder inside of this guy. So there are layout resource files, and that's where activity main is over here. And then we have value files for colors and styles and strings and so on and so forth. And then additionally, there's a Gradle file. And Gradle, I'm going to put him over on the far right over here. This is kind of like a pip install document. It has a lot of major document settings that are associated with this. So when we see things like implementation, app compat, this basically makes sure that the following packages are installed on the system. It runs a system check on them. Also, what we see inside of here are min SDK versions, compiled SDK versions. Here's our minimum SDK version. Remember that we set at the very beginning, so this is API 22. It also targets a maximum API of 27. As such, what we're going to see over here as well, that the maximum, the target SDK version is going to be matched in any of the libraries that we have to install over here. So for example, if I were going to say the target SDK version was 26 and the compile version is 26, this guy is right away going to complain because the target version is different than the compile version. So we're going to keep that guy at 27 and don't have to worry about that. You're also going to notice that the application ID comes back in here again. That package name is showing up again. This Gradle is kind of unhappy because I changed things, so he wants to sync. If you ever make a change in Gradle, you have to sync. I'm going to just let him be because I didn't actually change anything. Oh, you're not going to leave, are you? So this is just syncing over here, and yes, everything is the same. Great. We are going to hide you. The next thing to look at over here is the Android manifest. So the Android manifest has additional specifications that are basic to the app. So basically it's saying that inside of this particular package, all the files are going to inherit this particular package name. This is going to be the label for this thing, but actually this label, you noticed when I clicked on it, it changed from an actual value to this content over here that's referenced. When you see this @ symbol, this is saying in the resource folder named string/app name. So if I were to go over here in the res folder and I were to go into my values, this is going to reference this is going to reference the string file, and it's going to be the value app name inside of that strings file. So if I open strings over here, app name, my new app, and if I'm going to change this to something like my super duper app, put a D in there. The value referenced inside the Android manifest file, I don't know if he's going to sort of, let's close him. Our manifest file's up here. Oh yeah, look, my super duper app. And so that's coming from the fact that it is the strings XML with this particular, the value of this particular key. And similarly, over here we have like mipmap files, the icons, the styles, all of these things are referenced from XML files that are a part of the major, assortment of files that you're going to see over here on the left side. For every activity inside of your app, you're going to get, so this is your application, you're going to get an XML tag that corresponds to that particular activity. In this activity, it has a couple intent filters. So this is saying it can respond to a couple intents. Intents are basic messages in Android. And what this guy is saying that we can respond, this is effectively the message when you click on an icon on your app screen. This is saying, okay, you know what, when you click on the app icon somewhere in your system, what we're going to do is we're going to start this activity. It'll effectively allows your app to be run from the list of all the apps that you would see in the normal setting. And then so this is all sort of configuration stuff over here, but it's important that you use it, and it's important that you be aware of this. And finally, the sort of meat of the app over here. So if you think of this as a sort of like almost like HTML, you know, the HTML is of course like the bones and the structure. The JavaScript is your, you know, is your animation, and the CSS is the decoration. There's similar design paradigms that you would see inside of here. The XML gives you the sort of structure, and it's like combination of HTML and CSS, I guess, in a way over here. So the XML file over here is going to tell us, you notice that there's a header over here. It tells us, first of all, what type of layout that we're going to be using. So this is a constraint layout. The layout has an opening tag, and the tag has a closing tag down here. So the opening tag is matched. You can see it's closed with that / over here. The XML namespaces that are used, there are a few XML namespaces that are used. There's the Android namespace that's used, and you can see that when I clicked on this Android, several of these features over here opened up, and this is where the Android namespace is defined. XML namespace app is defined in this schema as Android, so you could go visit this space on the web and see what the actual definitions are. And we're going to use the app namespace over here, and the app namespace is just to sort of back up and say what these are. The Android namespace defines these sort of basic characteristics that you're going to see in nearly every view. This is a view, by the way. This is a GUI element. So if you kind of look at, you can look at what this thing is going to look like over here. This is our view. We can see my super duper app over here. This is what our app's going to look like when we run it. It's going to say hello world inside of here. So we can look at the design view or the text view. The design view is very convenient, but it is not going to help you understand what's going on in the same way that looking at the text will. So here we have our namespace definitions. We've included a text view, and this is just a built-in Android GUI element. It's got some text associated with it over here. And then there are additional things over here about the constraint. We're constrained to the bottom and of the left of the parent. And these constraints over here that you can see to the left of and all this parent stuff, you can see them in these springy looking things that constrain this element to more or less the center of the page. And you can play around with this interface to get a sense of like how the constraints work: up, left, down, back, left, right. Finally, we've got this string inside of here. And again, the string could have been defined in our strings XML file over here. So for example, if I made a new tag and I called, it doesn't like right now that there's a duplicate key inside of here. But if I were to say, like, for example, text view string inside of here, and let's call this guy, put some text inside of here. The way I'm going to be able to access this guy inside of my resource file. So this resource file is going to point to another resource file, right? And so what we're going to say here is add string. Oh, and right away, Android Studio is aware of the possibilities, and it presents app name, presents string, TV string. So I'm just going to click down over here and use this TV string, and this should be referenced over here. So you can see, hi there world. It's a little bit difficult, but I promise you that it's in there. And so basically that's it for right now. This is what our app's going to look like. We have my super duper app with a text view inside of here. It does nothing. So how do you make this actually show up? So the way that all the pieces fit together is through the Java file. It kind of coordinates everything. So the package, again, is going to show up in all the Java files associated with this particular app. I have my import statements. This is standard Java over here. This class of the main activity is it's like your your Hello World class, and then actually what's going to run this thing is there's a sequence called the activity lifecycle. There's a sequence of lifecycle methods that get called when the app is starting up, and the sort of first entry point that's important to know about is onCreate. And what happens in onCreate, and this is actually far more complicated than I'm simplifying it down to over here, but what happens in onCreate is that your app is sort of called into existence over here. It runs the super method to onCreate, and then this important guy right here, we set the content view. So what set a content view does is it takes a resource file, takes r.layout.activity_main, takes the resource file associated with activity main, and it loads it into the view so that it becomes part of the visual GUI space over here inside the app. If you do not run this line, you do not see anything in your app because it didn't load anything to display. So your Java is responsible for loading this display into the sort of view so you can see everything that's going on here. And there's actually far more that goes on with this as well. So what it does is as it runs this set content view, and r.layout.activity_main, note the activity main, the name is the same as this guy over here. It actually calls the constructors for any of the XML tags that are inside of here. So there's a constraint layout, a constructor is called for the constraint layout, and the whole hierarchy inside of that constraint layout, the constructor is called for a text view, and so on and so forth. So what you wind up getting over here are all of these Java calls that are happening in the background with this one little set content view. So you can't access any of these guys programmatically. Not that I have that code written over here, but you can't access them programmatically until you call this layout file. So then the question is, what is R? What is this R thing? So R is actually a Java class. If R is broken or missing or red or whatever, if you ever have a red R, the deal is you have a problem with your XML. So what happens when you compile your app over here? So when I press run or whatever you use to compile, Android is going to go through, and actually what's going to happen is Gradle, and so these Gradle scripts are going to go through, they're going to run through the entire project, and they're going to parse the entire resource hierarchy over here, and it's going to compile them into a class named R. And R is going to have all these sub keys and subclasses that correspond to each node of the tree of this thing. So you've got like R is basically this res folder over here, and R is going to have r.layout.activity_main because this guy is called activity main over here. Because what Gradle is actually doing in the background is he's constantly running through and iterating over your project and looking at all these particular values that are inside of here and parsing these XML files and adding it to this R class to assist in your ability to actually like navigate through this project. So for example, if I were to remove the r.layout over here, if I go to like r.values, which of course doesn't exist, here we go, r.string. The r.string, so values, I think I was confused about that, but the r.values corresponds to the things that are inside of this folder. So we have our values is implied, but I have r.string. Inside of r.string, because it was part of this res tree, r.string includes app name and TV string that we put inside of there before. And so you're going to see over here as well that these guys are actually just ints. So what they are, what each of these values, so when I say r.TV string over here, I'm just passing set content view to a layout, or I'm just passing this an int. And that int is mapped inside of this giant R file over here. And by looking at the R file, Gradle knows how to navigate from to put in all these individuals in where they need to be. R.layout, and there's a nice autofill over here. R.layout.activity main. This recognized, notice that this R.layout, this is just an int in this giant class of ints over here. And that gives the specification to like go find this particular layout file, plug them in, make it visible, and then run the app. And so that's basically what would happen when you would press run app over here.